Hey, what's up? It's the Lemesis, your nemesis, but you can call me Lem. And welcome to Reviewed by Lem. And this is the first episode of Reviewed by Lem, where I want to go over the movie, or technically the series slash movie of Mr. and Mrs. Smith. And recently, my wife and we just watched Mr. and Mrs. Smith by Brad and Angelina Jolie, or technically Brad Pitt and Angelina Jolie. And we wanted to, before we started watching the show, to get a nice refresher of what the movie was like, because the movie came out in like 2005. And then we didn't want, we, well, we wanted a part of the movie to refresh us of what the movie was going to be about, so we maybe can impose what we thought on the show. But what ended up happening is this show is drastically different from the movie in so many ways, and I would say in a lot of good ways. And to be honest with you, I wanted to do a review of this series because I was so bothered by the ending. That's what really I want to get on my soapbox and kind of, not yell, scream, or kind of just gripe and complain about. So let's just get started. So this is the show that just recently came out. It's on Amazon Prime. All 8 episodes have been released. You can watch them all at once. It was released on February 2nd. So the creators of the show were Donald Glover and Francesca Sloan. And then the stars are Donald Glover and Maya Erskine and Paul Dano. And there's quite a bit of other stars and cameos. Each episode was about 45 minutes to about 55 minutes ish, but I would say a minimum of 45 for each episode that aired. It was like a action slash comedy slash crime, but James Bondy. It was almost like if you were James Bond and you weren't as cool as him, but you had access to some nice attire. That's the vibe you're gonna get with this show. Overall, I think the show was really good. I think it didn't land on its ending, and that's something I definitely want to talk about today. So I want to go over roughly just the episodes that they have. We can go over just the premise of the show, just so you guys understand. Basically, I'm reading this straight off of IMDb. Two strangers land jobs with a spy agency that offers them a life of espionage, wealth, and travel. But the catch is the new identities in an arranged marriage. So basically, this is the opposite of Mr. and Mrs. Smith from the jump, the movie. And Mr. and Mrs. Smith in the movie, Brad and Angelina don't know that they're spies. And I would say for a good portion of the beginning of the movie, they don't know this. And then they find out by accident because they both merge in one mission trying to get the same person. That happens to be a ploy of both of the companies, because basically they wanted to take each other out, either by accident or on purpose. In this show, the show is about both of them knowing from the very beginning that, first off, he's not really John Smith, she's not really Jane Smith, so they know from the very beginning. They also know this is an arranged marriage from the beginning, as we read on the premise or the synopsis of the show. So they know that coming in. And then they get all these boons of riches, right? They get this amazing like townhome slash house that's in New York City or some major city. I actually don't remember where they're located. I'm pretty sure it's in New York City, but a major metropolitan city. And before they get to this townhome, you get to see in episode 1 where they're asked a series of questions from this computer or this machine that's in front of them. They have to put their nail clippings inside of the machine, and they're asked a bunch of questions to kind of set the stage of how serious this is going to be. So then they get into their townhome and they meet each other for the first time, which is quite unique. To me, I could tell from the very beginning that Maya Erskine's character, she seems a little cold. That might be her natural demeanor, but she wasn't really smiling. Some people can kind of have, the quote unquote resting bitch face. But, if you throw in a smile here and there, it's not, you're not going to warrant that kind of opinion of yourself from other people. But she was always very, reserved in her approach. you could tell between the two of them, Donald Glover's character was more open, excited to do this, and which is a very unique thing. This is something that I would could never do myself or even come close to do. Um, and like, I mean, let's just think about an arranged marriage, right? An arranged marriage is pretty difficult for, I would say, the average person in the world. But that used to be something that everybody did back in the day. That was like, very cultural growing up for many, many years. But first episode was fantastic. I think it set the stage really, really well. The second episode, I think, got a little goofy. That's when they were given a mission to go to a party, and it was a silent auction, and they had to catch someone there. And that particular character, let me see, let me pull him up really quickly. That character was played by, he's pretty famous, John Turturro. He was Eric Shane. He played a billionaire, and he was basically the character they were going for, that they had to stow away and record some of the things that he was saying after they gave him a truth serum. That character was that episode was goofy. Didn't really enjoy it too much. But it wasn't terrible. But it did set the stage for future episodes. And I think that's the reason why I wanted to mention that one. Episodes 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7, I think were dynamite, honestly. And the major thing with this show is that it's heavily relationship based, and it's less mission based. Like, the mission is like an afterthought. A mission is like the thing that they're doing while the episode is going on, but the dialogue in this show is just absolutely fantastic, especially at the end of episodes where they would just kind of have pillow talk. I really enjoyed the pillow talk. It's really hard to watch this show and not try to put yourself in the shoes of the two individuals between Donald Glover's character and Maya Erskine's, because it's a relationship show. And then I'm also in a interracial relationship. My wife is white, I'm black, and we really both enjoyed this show. We both hated the ending, and we're gonna get to that as well. So then, when we get to episode 3, they start to take this on the road. Now you start to realize that this organization that they're working for is much bigger than their first mission. Because in the first mission, it was something simple as like, drop off this package. You had to intercept the woman who had a package and then drop it off at this house. And then when they finish dropping the package off at this house and they casually walk out, once they like find out what's in the package, they realize it's just a cake. And as they're walking away from the house, boom, the house explodes. And they're like, whoa, this is real. Like, these missions aren't minuscule. These are serious missions, because this bomb just went off after we delivered the package. If we would have stayed for 30 or 40 more seconds, we're donezo. Second mission we just talked about, they just had to record what this billionaire would say after they gave him truth serum. It was goofy because they were at one point, the way they decided to do it was, she spoke to the billionaire and convinced him to take one of the waiters, which happened to be Donald Glover, and say, hey, since we got a lot of money, let's just pay one of the waiters a ton of money to just do whatever we want them to do. So they go up into a room where no one's around, and they start doing weird stuff, which I guess billionaires and millionaires are into stuff like this, but they start walking on all fours and barking and licking each other and basically acting like dogs, which was silly. And then at one point, they both jab him with the truth serum, which they weren't supposed to do. And that got him really, really loopy, crazy. He ended up like running out of the room, and he started speaking to people at the event and started saying a lot of revealing things. And they started to record that. But the negative was the truth serum, they gave him too much. They were supposed to give him just one. So in the end, that character, the cameo, he ended up dying at the end of that episode. And it kind of sucked. And there was a lot of funny scenes, the scenes where Donald Glover is almost throwing up, and that's what made the movie or the show very unique. Because you didn't know, you would be horrified and mortified, and then you'd be confused because you at points in time throughout the show you didn't really know what was going on. I like how they did that. There would be scenes that would show up especially like at the beginning of certain episodes, and you would just go, "What is happening here?" And then as things started to unravel, you would kind of get settled in, like, oh, "Okay, okay, I understand." Because it was a very emotional ride, in my opinion. It jerked with you left and right, and we'll talk more about that when we get to the later episodes. So let's go to episode 3. So that's called The First Vacation. And this is when they start to go on the road with everything. Because we would assume that the first 2 episodes were just in the major city that they were located in. The third episode, that's when they get on their first vacation. And they're like in the Alps somewhere. They're somewhere, I don't know, Colorado, some location where there's skiing and a lot of things going on there. And their mission there is just they're supposed to just watch this particular couple and bug their phones and then listen to a call that occurs at like 5 o'clock. And it's about this couple that's going through this rough patch in their relationship. At this point, the two main characters they're into each other. Um, and I'm pretty sure they're having sex at this point, and they tried to come up with like rules for their relationship, what they were going to do, what they weren't going to do. But when you do a job like this, you got to be close, you got to put that extra effort in. I know that it's hard, but it's like any given day you could die, and it's just like you gotta open up a little bit more. So I don't know if I would have opened up that quickly, but I really did enjoy that their connection and how they were able to be comfortable with one another. They were going through the infatuation phase, right? A lot of people have that when they first meet someone, you're attracted to them, and that happens. But eventually the infatuation wears off, and I think you see that in this show very quickly. Now, you don't really get the length of time that occurs from episode to episode, because at some point you do realize from the dialogue that, man, they've done quite a bit of missions. Like they've probably been together for quite some time. But since every day seems like a work day, does it really matter? I don't know. Every day seems quite dangerous, but they basically split up, and you start to see that they have a lot of issues that come up. Unfortunately, you start to see more of the personalities and the differences between the two, I would say, in episode 3, because the reflection of the couple that they're watching and trying to bug their phones kind of is a reflection on their relationship as well, or like the beginning of the end of their relationship in episode 3. So then that's when I would say Donald Glover probably does the most egregious thing, where he doesn't really stick to the plan. He breaks away from the plan. He's pissed off. He doesn't really like how Maya Erskine's character is talking to him, but he chooses to me, I think when you have spats and relationship issues and you have arguments, you don't take the route that he took in one of the arguments they had in the show, where he kind of just fed into her being a baby and it became a even bigger baby. And that really doesn't help, especially when you're trying to do some of the things that they were doing in this show. And then he almost got himself killed, which was kind of crazy because he ended up fighting off kidnappers. At one point, kidnappers took the woman that they were actually watching. And then there was some like short scene where there was a ransom. And then basically the husband, and because the husband and wife that they were watching were going through some issues, he just was like, kill her. It doesn't really matter. Like, we're going to keep the money. And, that's basically what he and his wife, quote unquote, agreed to. But then when the wife sees that reality of what they agreed to happen in real time, of course she has regrets. She's annoyed that he even said that. But then Donald Glover comes to the rescue. He's got a little bit of a military background, so he uses some of his hand-to-hand combat to kill the rest of the men. And then, of course, he uses a gun to shoot them. And then, Maya Erskine's character, she comes up and she sees him and she helps him. And they have some really great moments, some really on-screen pillow talk moments near the end of the show. That episode was really, really good. Then we start to get to episode 4. And episode 4 and episode 8 were probably the weirdest episodes of the entire series, because episode 4 introduces, well, they get like a day off and they introduce these other characters that happen to also be John and Jane Smith. and they end up doing a double date. And it's so weird to have a double date at your house with people you just met. And what made me so bothered by this episode was that none of their radars went off. Maybe I'm just a very guarded person, but in the double date episode, John he meets another John Smith in the middle of like a what would you call it? A farmer's market, and he's like ordering a drink like orange juice, and basically it's a setup from the beginning, and I would have assumed that as well. Like, what are the odds of you meeting another John and Jane who work for this company randomly on your day off? And it doesn't go well in the end, which we'll get to. But they have a double date, and the entire double date that they're having at their home is just weird. It's very awkward vibe, a weird vibe. You could tell something's going on. It's eerie. The conversations, you know, I don't know, they don't seem favorable. You know, like when you have a conversation where it's almost like when someone's laughing at you, but you know that they're not, but you don't know that they're laughing at you. That's how this feels. But when you get to watch someone laughing at a person that they don't know is laughing at them, that's how it feels being the viewer when you watch this episode. So I didn't quite like that episode because I knew something was up, but it did set the stage for what was going to happen in future episodes. So then we get to the famous screenshot that you see right in front of you right now. This episode, episode 5. This is where you could tell that they've gotten into a nice rhythm of doing things. They know how to work together. And, you know, Donald Glover's character is really good at doing things on the fly. Maya Erskine is focused on getting things done, at sticking to the plan. So, you know, at that point, you could tell she's very controlling. And, you know, to me, I think I'm somewhere in between because I could see both sides. Because this is not something you really want to mess around with. If you have a plan, you want to stick to that plan. You know, and I get how Donald Glover's like, well, you know, every mission, let's just kind of wing it. But when you wing it, that's when mistakes can occur. So I think there could be a happy medium in between the two, right? Because you might have a plan and then you can't stick to the plan, but then you make the adjustments and changes along the way. So that's what leads to episode 6, where episode 6 they start having a lot of problems. And this is the episode where they're in couples therapy, and that's actually the name of it. It's called Couples Therapy Naked and Afraid. And we get more cameos as well there. And basically every single I would say it's broken up into maybe 3 parts. And the first part, they're sitting close together in this episode, and they're talking to the therapist, and they're, you know, joking and trying to work things out and kind of taking jabs at each other. But then when you get to that third part of the episode, they're not even sitting next to each other anymore. Even the lighting and everything that's set up for this is drastically different. And you're really starting to see the relationship deteriorate because they're kind of throwing a bunch of missions out that they've had during a period of time that we don't know. And you see them bickering. You see a lot of funny moments. You see a lot of sad moments. You see a lot of serious moments where they're just going at each other's neck. And, you know, then you start to get the reality of like relationships setting in. I think that's why I like the show so much, because, you know, of course we don't do the job that these individuals did in the show, but you do get the sense of like, man, like we're not the only ones having these arguments, huh? So I really, really enjoyed that. Then episode 7 like started to bother me. When I got to episode 7, this one's called Infidelity. And you find out that because their relationship's been on the rocks, they've been doing all these crazy missions, you know, they've been going to the therapist, and you find there's, at the very beginning, it looks like John Smith is cheating on Jane and Maya Erskine's character. And it bothered me. I remember looking at my wife, and we were just kind of like, dude, what you doing, bro? Like, come on, man. I get you guys are, you know, living your life on the edge, but like, you know, and any day could be your last day. But, you know, you guys have been through so much in this relationship. Why in the world would you do something like this? And Maya, she, she finds the woman. And this is one of those episodes where you started off and you're very confused. And as the story goes on, you're like, oh, okay, this makes perfect sense. So as you're watching this episode, there's a woman that apparently Donald Glover's character is talking to, and he's been talking to. He's been talking to her for like close to a month, and it looks like this is this woman that he's cheating on Maya Erskine with. But what you end up finding out was he ended up having his own mission where he had to kill a particular person, and this was the person that he was supposed to kill. But he chose to try to kill her over a period of time. Like he wanted to kind of warm up to it and do it his own way. And Maya was just annoyed. And she just was like, you know what? I'm just going to end this. You had a whole month to kill this person. You didn't do it. So I'm just going to come and I'm going to do it. But in the process of doing that, she wanted to pry to find out, like, okay, what did John reveal to you while he was doing his little fake infidelity relationship that he had with you? And she learned some things about herself that I think she needed to know. Even though it's kind of funny to me that she kind of learned a lot of these things in her couples therapy in that episode, in episode 6, but she wanted to know what this woman brought that she clearly did not. And that episode really messed with me. This made me feel like there's a chance their relationship would not work, that this relationship could fail. Because at the end of that episode, it got so bad. They ended up, this is when they got their third fail. Because as they went throughout every episode, they were allowed up to 3 fails in their missions. And there's some things like that I passed on by that I didn't really discuss because I don't want to go into too much detail. But basically, they had 3 fails. 3 fails, something bad would happen. In addition to that, their company would communicate to both of them, but in particular, they would communicate to Maya, and Maya's character had seemed to be very favored amongst the company compared to John, because John, he broke a lot of rules. You know, he wasn't really supposed to have connections with people in the past, like his mom, but he had that. You know, he did a lot of things not by the book. And Maya was always just very cold and distant. So, of course, that kind of a character, that kind of a person for a company, that's what they're probably going to want to go for. They want to go for the company person, the person who just looks and thinks the company can do no wrong. They're not objective in any way. They just think that whatever the company says is what they do. And she was so focused on getting up in the company, moving up in the company. And John was very free flowing. I mean, they had issues where they talked about trying to have a baby, you know, and which you might find weird, but it made sense when you watch the episodes for those things to naturally progress based on where they were. So then when you get to infidelity, that episode, it stung, but it was nice to know that he wasn't really cheating on her. I mean, he was doing it for the job. And apparently they had to have sex with people for certain missions, but apparently neither one of them actually did it. And that was one of the things I didn't really like about Maya Erskine's character. She would just lie for the sake of lying just to get Donald Glover's character upset. That bothered me, that a person would have that kind of mindset, that motive. But again, that led to one of the reasons why I loved the show, because it felt so real. And then it comes to the last episode, what I'm probably going to get on the soapbox for the most and complain about. And I'm just really, really, really disappointed in how this show ended, because trust me, I did the best I could to kind of summarize every episode just so that I can lead up to episode 8. And man, oh man, boy did they poop the bed on episode 8. Like, so at the end of episode 7, they've had so many fights, so many issues that Donald Glover just says to his character, to Jane, you know, I'm done. Like, tomorrow I'm out. And that's because, 1, they had their third and final fail. 2, Donald Glover was breaking all these rules, doing things he shouldn't have been doing, not realizing that, like, hey, this company is serious. You can't just walk away, right? And there were so many signs of that, like, bro, there are like deathly consequences if you were to leave this company. You don't just get to leave and then go talk to your friends and go back to your regular life. This is something you got to do for life, because you're out there killing people and doing all these ridiculous, nefarious things. So this is real. And this is where, to me, the show lost its sauce. It tried to go down the path of the original movie, Mr. and Mrs. Smith. With first and foremost, Donald Glover and Maya Erskine, they're great actors, but they can't really pull off action scenes really well. The running, the fighting was just it was helter skelter. It was good, I would say, from episodes 1 to 7, but when in episode 8 it's called a breakup, but it was mostly a breakdown. I just felt like they really broke down. They tried to lean too heavily into what Brad and Angelina did in the movie, and it didn't fit. Like, it didn't fit at all, because they tried to play the role of, like, well, first off, because they had their third and final fail, the characters that they met in the episode of Double Date, that eerie, weird episode that I mentioned earlier, they come back, and what they end up finding out is that this version of John and Jane Smith, they do high risk missions, or even super high risk missions. And the reason why they do super high risk missions is because all they do is they kill John and Jane Smiths that basically break the rules, or basically are, that need to be done away with. So the fact that they were even introduced was a problem. Like, they could basically tell, like, hey, like, we're going to introduce ourselves. And I would think that, like, the company kind of felt like this was going to happen just because of the differences that they have, because for some reason they just saw a lot of things and they could tell a lot of things. I mean, of course, they probably were recording them. They had cameras everywhere. So maybe they saw that, but they would do super high risk missions. And now it was their mission to kill Donald Glover's and Maya Erskine's character. But the way that they did it is they kind of posed themselves. They were hidden, and this is the part that I didn't really get when I first watched the episode. Near the beginning of the episode, because Donald Glover left because he said he was done, he tried to just go back to his old life and hang out with his mom, and Maya Erskine was left inside of the home. So she ends up taking shots from outside trying to kill her. She ends up losing her cat. So she thinks that from that attack that somehow that was Donald Glover who was trying to attack her. You find that out later in the episode, but it just doesn't add up and it doesn't make sense. So she uses that as an opportunity to say, oh, you're going to kill me? Well, I'm going to go kill you. So she devises a plan to blow him up at his home. So she sets up a bomb, but actually, no, she doesn't set up a bomb. The couple does. The other John and Jane, they do. So they're the ones who set up a bomb at his home to make them think they're trying to kill each other. But I don't think the episode really portrays that. You find out later when they do this awful scene what actually happened. So basically, Jane, to save her life, tries to kill Donald Glover, even though she was attacked at the beginning of the episode, which didn't really make sense. Like, why would they try to attack you at the beginning of the episode and then stop? And then go, all right, if you just terminate Donald Glover's character, we'll stop trying to kill you. Like, who wants to work for a company like that? Who gives you a mission to kill your John Doe or your John Smith, and then they don't even give you an opportunity to do it or time to do it, and then immediately they just start killing you. And then you just kind of go, you know what? You killed my cat. I'm sorry, but I mean, I didn't mean to take so long. So let me go try to kill Donald. It's like at that point, you're like, nah, bruh. Like, let me contact Donald, find out what's going on. Like, just a quick phone call would have just solved the problem. But that's not how she went about it. It made no sense. Yeah, he left, but I'm sure if you pick up the phone and you call this guy, it would make sense. He would pick up the phone and be like, hey, what's up? You want to talk? He's a softer guy. The whole show portrayed that. So I don't understand why they didn't go this route. So then the biggest reason why I hate this is they go through back and forth doing the whole Brad and Angelina thing in the movie where they're trying to kill each other, but they're clearly missing. I mean, you see moments where you're like, bro, she could have gun clapped that dude jumping over the table. She was hiding behind the steps. He could have easily clipped her. She would have been done. But they don't. And I like how they, at least, that's the one thing that I do enjoyed, was that they always try to cover up their sins with the dialogue. Like, the dialogue will clear up questions you have, like, bro, I don't know about that. And then the dialogue actually talks about that. The conversations, don't mention it. So at one point, when you see clearly missed shots, you hear Donald Glover's character and Maya Erskine say, like, you know what? I had you when you were around the table. I didn't take that shot. You know, I could have killed you when you were by the steps. I didn't take that shot. So that was really fun to see. But I didn't like that they were fighting. I didn't like that they were trying to kill each other, and then definitely not talk about it. Like, they went straight from 0 to 100. It was like, I'm going to leave. But then she just thinks that just because she lost her cat, she's just going to try to kill him. And then she thought that was him. That makes no sense. It really didn't make any sense. Then they find this, then they're like fighting. And this is the part that bothers me the most. There was a couple scenes where throughout the episodes where Maya Erskine's character started to, like, she did some hand-to-hand combat, right? Now, unless you Ronda Rousey or some other female UFC fighter, it's just not believable when you see her character trying to bow up and fight she fights this like Asian dude in an elevator at one point. And I just couldn't believe it. Like, I mean, I'm a big guy, so it's hard to not put yourself in that position. But it just didn't make sense seeing her judo toss this dude like he was lightweight. I mean, even if he was like $170 or $180, I just don't see it with her little scrawny arms. I don't see it. Ronda Rousey probably could do it. I could believe that her throwing a punch to your face would probably hurt. I'm sure a lot of dudes would still take her, but it just didn't make sense seeing her do that. And that's what they try to lean into heavy with Donald Glover at the end. Now, I know a lot of the fight scenes with her and Donald Glover, he wasn't coming at her with everything. He was mainly trying to stop her. He was taking a lot of hits, but she just did a lot of unbelievable things. Like, one of the tosses she did was just like, bro, girl, like, it's just not possible, bro. Stop doing that stuff, man. Like, what's the movie, a show I love? The show I love was, with Carrie Mathison, Homeland. Homeland was fantastic. Homeland was such a really good show, but Homeland never made Carrie Mathison look like she was Superwoman. Now, if you have a situation where you are a Kryptonian and you happen to be Superwoman, or you happen to be some super soldier and you're Peggy Carter from the Marvel, from Marvel Comics, okay, cool. That makes sense. You could throw me like I'm nothing, but there's none of that as an explanation here. So when you start to do that, that really does bother me. So they're fighting, and Donald Glover's getting tatted up. Like, he's getting messed up, and they're missing each other. And then they have this silly scene where Donald Glover finally gets her down after they fight for a hot minute, and he ties her up. And then he injects her with the truth serum, and he injects himself with the truth serum. And then they just have, like, a silly conversation where they ask each other questions. And this is the part of the movie, the show that pisses me off, because at this point, I'm just sitting there thinking, bro, this is when you like look at the timer and you start to look at like, how many more minutes do we have left? This is the last episode and there's like 15 minutes left. And you're like, what the crap is going on right now? How are you going to end this show with 15 minutes left on the clock? What is going on? And I'm starting to get so irate. Like, dude, don't you mess this up. Because so far it's goofy. They've been trying to kill each other. It's stupid. None of these fools are talking. At one point, the mom just breaks into the house and she's there. And you're thinking, man, the mom should die at some point. Like, it just doesn't make sense how the mom is still alive. None of this makes sense. Then the mom's trying to be like, hey, I know y'all cats are going through a divorce or a problem, but you need to know. And you find out Donald Glover's real name is Michael. Michael is not John. John Smith is not John Smith. His name is actually Michael. And then you find out in this episode that Maya Erskine's character name is not Jane. It's Alana, which I thought was a really nice name, by the way. I thought Alana's a nice name. But after the truth serum, it's just so goofy. It made no sense. It felt like, bro, you're paying homage to the movie, but you did such a good job with this story. bump Brad and Angelina. Why are you going back to the movie for this episode? And to me, there was not enough comedy that happened in the movie for it to make sense. There was not enough of the plot of the story to lead to this whole, well, we're going to hate each other and kill each other thing. The fact that she drew that conclusion from her cat dying at the beginning of the last episode, it made absolutely no sense. It couldn't, there was no connecting of the dots there. Like, stop it. And then that's when, you know, they basically fought each other, shot every gun that was in that stupid house, bullet holes everywhere, the full-blown Mr. and Mrs. Smith, the movie. Then they're talking and they're making up, and then you find out, and they do what you want them to do. You know, you want them, at least I do, you want them to make amends. You want the relationship to work. You don't want it to end. You know, they didn't do what James Bond did, which the final James Bond movie with Daniel Craig was really annoying. How that ended, where they killed off Bond. Sorry if you didn't see the movie, but hey, spoiler alert. There was going to be spoilers in this in this video. So if you didn't want that one, I'm sorry. But like, yeah, I get that. And to me, those movies were still fantastic no matter what. But the ending of that movie was terrible. And the same thing with this movie as well, this show. The ending of this show was not good at all. The whole episode sucked because it didn't match. It didn't make its sense. There were so many serious elements to a relationship. For you to end it off goofy like that, it didn't stick the landing. So then after they are still on their truth serum, that's when the other Jane and John show up. And they're like, hey, we're actually in super high risk missions because our mission is to kill other Johns and Janes, and we're here to kill you. And they're like, man, we're sorry, but we really like you. Sit down, we'll talk. And basically, I mean, it gets serious very quickly again, right? Because now they're in a situation where this John and Jane, they're doing that weird thing. The acting is very off-putting. It's eerie. It's very, like when you're watching a, what's the guy's name who does the movie? Man, Pulp Fiction. Like we're watching Pulp Fiction. I can't remember the director's name. Very famous director. It's so crazy to me. When you're watching a movie like his, you're always watching the movie, wondering when the blood and the gore is going to start. You're always watching the movie, wondering when, and I'm going to look this up because he's going to drive me nuts. I got to look up Pulp Fiction and the director of Pulp Fiction. Quentin Tarantino. My goodness. When you're watching a Quentin Tarantino film, to me, I'm always waiting for when the gore is going to start. And that's the vibe that they give. They always give the vibe that, like, they're not here for pleasant things, and they're here to bring the ruckus. And that's the vibe I get from them. And then you could tell the truth serum's starting to wear off on both Donald Glover and Maya Erskine's characters. And then there's just like a crescendo where, Donald Glover does something to kind of distract them. Maya Erskine grabs a gun from under the table. She shoots the guy, the other John Smith, in like the eye. And it looks like he's done because I think at some point he takes a bullet to the eye. He's screaming, oh my God, my eye, my eye, my eye. Donald Glover starts running, and the other Jane Smith just takes like a machine gun and she just starts spraying. So she ends up clipping Donald Glover, and he goes upstairs, and then Maya Erskine follows afterwards because there's like a panic room that's in their home. And this is what leads to the part of the story that I don't like, because it tried to add funny elements, goofy elements to the majority of the episode, and then it ends very, very seriously when there wasn't a serious episode to tie up the differences between Donald Glover and Maya Erskine. And I just don't think that they should have gone that route at all. There should have been a very serious moment, right? Where, in my opinion, I felt like the episode should have been like there was a mission or something that occurred to them that really had to bring them together because they really needed each other. And then you could see their strengths, right? You could see the strengths of both Donald Glover and Maya Erskine working together in order for them to survive. And then because of that, that's why they're able to, quote unquote, complete the mission or survive whatever it is. That's not what happens. It's this goofy, stupid scene where they're talking to each other and telling each other the truth, when they're asking each other questions while they're on the truth serum. And then all of a sudden, the other John and Jane show up and say, hey, we're here to kill you. So then I think what ends up happening at the end is the other John dies. I'm pretty sure he dies because in one of, like, there's a scene where they're looking through the cameras when they're in the panic room, and you see him on the floor. His feet are, he's on the floor laying down. His feet are pointing in the air. He looks like he's dead. And the other Jane, she just comes upstairs with like a machine gun, and she is waiting outside the door of the panic room. And then that's when you find out that Donald Glover's character has been shot, and it looks like he's been brutally shot. Well, brutally is a stretch. He's shot like in his side. I would say, he's a small guy, so like myself, I got a little fat. So I mean, if I got shot there, I don't know if any major organs would be hit. But he's a small guy. He gets shot on like his lower right abdomen, and you could tell he's waning. And she and Maya Erskine gets in there, and she only has one gun with one bullet. And there's a camera system in there that shows the camera outside what's going on behind the door. And then her plan is just, first, this is kind of where I thought things were coming together, because she starts to ask Donald Glover what we should do. And he's like, you should wait till nightfall. Then that'll give us, an upper hand. And then, but she could tell he's waning. So she's like, nope, I'm not going to, eventually, like just seconds later, she's like, nope, I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to open the door on 3, and then I'm going to shoot her. And I got one bullet. So that's what happens. She says, let's open the door on 3. They try to open it. She opens the door on 3, and they pan out to the window outside of the townhome, and you just hear and see 3. You see 3 flashes of gunfire, and you hear 3 shots. You hear bam, bam, bam. And the show ends. And that's and that's how they end the series. So you don't know. You don't know if the 3 shots, you don't know if Maya Erskine got a shot off. You don't know if the other Jane Smith got her, because the vibe could be she Maya Erskine missed, she shot, and then basically the other Jane shoots Maya Erskine, and then she just shoots Donald Glover. There was the 3 shots. You have no idea. You don't know if Maya Erskine actually had 3 bullets. And maybe she, bam, bam, bam. Maybe she shot Jane Smith 3 times, because, who knows? We have no idea. But you don't see anything. And then the final scene you see is the annoying neighbor, played by Paul Dano. He stops by because he's the guy right next door. He's hearing the gunshots. He's hearing all this stuff. He just shows up, and he's like, hey, I got a book here to give to you, The Prophet. And that's I guess the symbolic book behind it all. But he just stops by and says, hey, I want to, he sees all the gunshot, in the walls. And that's what makes it so weird. Because if you were the neighbor and you heard that, when you want to call the cops, like, what is going on over there? He shows up, he sees bullet holes everywhere. He leaves the apartment or the townhome very quickly and calls his buddy, and he's like, yep, we're going to be able to sell this townhome. This should be this will be my greatest sale ever, because he's a real estate agent. And it's just like, this is how you end the show. This is how you end the show. It doesn't make any sense. Oh my gosh, to be that invested, to watch all of those episodes, and for the show to end that way, all the things that they went through, I thought they did a great job. To me, if you're going to stick to doing something different, you should stick to doing something different. And they just failed tremendously on that. That they could have done something drastically different with this show, make it unique. And in the end, we don't know if the show will get renewed for a season 2. And even if it gets renewed for a season 2, I mean, will Donald Glover and Maya Erskine be in it? I don't know, because they could just say, all right, well, they died, and let's move on, right? This is about Mr. and Mrs. Smith, another Jane and John Smith that we're just going to pick up on. And I just don't like that, right? I don't like that at all. It wouldn't make sense. And I get why, if that's the case, because the beginning of the show, the first episode, the first two characters you see are another Jane and John Smith, and apparently they're supposed to reflect Angelina and Brad Pitt's characters from the movie, and they end up dying in the beginning. So if they two end up dying, and then apparently in the movie or the book, The Prophet, it's supposed to be a reflection of that. Yeah, I just thought this was absolutely a terrible ending. I thought it was very lazy of them for them to take so much time to write all those other great stories, those great missions, episodes, unique banter, unique dialogue, for it to end the way that it ended and for it to not make sense. To me, there was no premise for them to just think that the other party was trying to kill each other when clearly Donald Glover saw Maya Erskine try to kill him. That was clear. But there was not anything clear about Maya Erskine believing Donald Glover was trying to kill her. So it didn't make sense for her to even have her attack, even if she lost her cat. Like, come on. He said he promised in the show in earlier episodes that he would never do that. And if that's what they thought was sufficient to lay a seed, because at that point he made that comment in like one of the episodes, and she was like, "I don't know if you're joking or being serious right now." And it's like, bro, this dude loved you, man. Like, he was a softie. He was such a softie. He just wanted to hear you say "I love you," and he just wanted to know that you cared about him. There's no way in the world he was gonna say, "Man, I'm leaving in the morning to go take care of my mom," and then he was gonna come gun clap you and shoot you through the window and kill your cat. That just made no sense. So they needed to tie that up. I would take a mulligan if they were willing to redo that episode. But to me, I would watch this show all the way up from episodes 1 to 7 and then make up what you want for episode 8. Because episode 8 just did not end well for me. There was not enough dialogue in between in any of the episodes to set up that kind of a finish, for it to be that goofy, and for both characters to draw the conclusions they did. Plus, they weren't able to hold up the fighting scenes, the chasing scenes. It just wasn't really action packed where it was fun. It felt like it was better than if I was doing it, because you'd be like, "Oh my God, he looks so terrible." But it just wasn't cool. Every other episode was interesting and cool and exciting, but this one, they were attacking each other. I just didn't like it. So that's all I got for you today on my series review of Mr. and Mrs. Smith. And thank you for joining me on an episode of Lem Reviewed, or Reviewed by Lem. And if you're watching me on Twitch, please hit me up with a follow. If you're watching me on YouTube, please make sure you like and subscribe. So, as always, if you don't know the Lord Jesus Christ, you should get to know him. It'll be the best decision you ever make in your life. Look up, look up the Lord's Prayer and ask him to come into your life. So, thanks for joining me on this video, and hopefully I'll catch you on the next one. Peace, love, and have.